Well, I appreciate that. The only problem is it was a marked copy where I had notes on my electronic agenda, which are now apparently lost to me. How such a thing could happen, I don't know. However, I will continue to work on it, and I will thank you for that sort of help as we move along. I will call this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper to order for November 2nd, 2021. It is somewhat auspicious. This is our first business meeting as a new council. As council will have seen, preparing for today's meeting and reading the agenda from October 5th, at that time, council adopted a land acknowledgement policy. And in that policy is a statement that although a territorial acknowledgement does not need to be done at every meeting and gathering of the municipality of Jasper, it should be done when it is meaningful and appropriate. And it seems to me both meaningful and appropriate as this new council commences its work for this term and for this year. It would be appropriate to, in fact, make the acknowledgement approved by council last month. So I would like to begin this particular meeting by respectfully acknowledging that Jasper National Park and the municipality of Jasper are on Treaty 6 and Treaty 8 territories, as well as Métis Region 4. This land is the traditional territory, meeting ground, gathering place, traveling route, and home for the Denza, the Nahiawak, the Anishinaabe, the Secwepemc, the Stoney Nakoda, and the Métis Nations. We make this acknowledgement to honor the relationship Indigenous people have with this land, to remind us of our responsibility and obligations to this place and to Indigenous peoples, and to affirm our accountability to address the ongoing impacts of colonization that continue to affect Indigenous peoples. And I would suggest that at least annually, when we start our term after an organizational meeting each year, it would be appropriate to make such a land acknowledgement, and otherwise as councillors, when they chair meetings, are entitled to do, and as they feel appropriate, certainly encouraged to make use of the land acknowledgement that previous council had endorsed. And so with that, I will turn to the orders of the day. First is approval of the agenda for today. Are there any additions, deletions, other changes to be made to the agenda? Councillor Demota.
All right. I wanted to start with just adding one thing to other new business on the agenda today, but it's, you know, the one thing I wanted to add was things to add to next week's committee of the whole. So it's essentially three things. So I don't know if you prefer to have them broken down into three or just under other new business 10.1 additions to the committee of the whole agenda next week.
The ball is in your court, but if you want to do it sort of as an omnibus matter, that's fine. Additions to next week's committee of the whole, they all fall under the same rubric.
Yeah, there's several things, but I didn't want to give the idea that I was hijacking an agenda or with my own things. And I understand that there's a lot of stuff coming up before the new year. We've got AUMA. You know, we've got the parking study coming up and foremost the budget to deal with. So I have a few things that, you know, I want to like put towards like doing some spitballing going forward. So yeah, so I think just one item, 10.1 is additions to the committee of the whole agenda would be my way of wanting to approach that.
Okay, and just to be clear, additions to committee of the whole for the next committee of the whole, or
for the next committee,
a subsequent committee of the whole. And I only say that because although I haven't seen an agenda yet for committee of the whole, our agendas have been rather heavily weighted at committee of the whole. So I can't speak as to the workload that is coming up, but that's fine. I hear your motion. So a request from Councillor Demota, or a motion to add to today's agenda under item 10 as 10.1 other new business, additions to the committee of the whole meeting for November 9th, 2021. Are there any other proposed additions to today's agenda? All right, I'll call a question then first on the addition to the agenda as proposed by Councillor Demota. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And might I have a motion then to approve the agenda subject to the addition of item 10.1? Councillor Melnick, thank you very much. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. The regular minutes of the meeting of October 5th have been circulated. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? If not, may I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes? And I would request that Councillor Demota or Councillor Wilson, since they were at that meeting, make that motion. And Councillor Wilson, I saw your hand. So a motion from Councillor Wilson that Council approve the minutes of the regular meeting of October 5th, 2021. All those in favor? And there are none opposed. That is carried. Agenda item 4, presentations. There is nothing listed, and I will just confirm, Mr. Given, nothing has arisen since the preparation of the agenda.
No, Your Worship.
All right, thank you. That takes us to agenda item 5, business arising from the previous minutes. Is there any business arising? Right. If there is not, that is fine. We will turn to agenda item 6, department reports. Again, nothing scheduled, and I presume nothing has arisen, Mr. Given. All right, if not, then we are at agenda item 7, request for decision. We have one item for decision today. That is agenda item 7.1, COVID relief reserves, utility rebates. There is an attachment. And Mr. Given, I will turn it to you to present the matter.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. For Council's information, this is the one item that we have as a referral from committee forward to Council that has crossed over the election. There are some other items that the previous Council had been dealing with that are on the motion action list that you'll see through the course of business. But this is the only one where there was a specific recommendation from committee coming to Council. And so, well, in the future, when there are items coming from your committee to your Council, we may deal with these slightly differently. Maybe I'll go into a bit more detail since not all members of Council were here during the committee discussion. I know many of you were watching, obviously. But in front of you, you see a recommendation from Committee of the Whole, which met on October 12th to review and consider the matter of utility rate rebates for businesses to be supported from the COVID Recovery Reserve. The committee passed a motion, which you'll see under agenda item 7.1, that differs slightly from the administrative recommendation of the committee. And so we just want to acknowledge that there is the original report from October 12th is there in its full unedited format. And the recommendation from committee is here in your Council agenda package, which has a slight variation. At a very high level, and again, I'm sure Council members have read the package and or were watching in on the committee meeting. But the intent is to identify an opportunity to assist business owners who face business closures as a result of COVID, either through government closures, government mandated closures, through 2020 up to current, or for other reasons related to COVID. Administration is recommending that council provide essentially a rebate on solid waste and recycling fees, as these fees are not based on consumption. So if a business was closed for any period of time over the last couple of years as a result of COVID, they would not have faced a water bill if they used or consumed no water at their business. But they would have continued to receive minimum bills for solid waste collection, garbage or recycling, because those utilities are billed out on that minimum charge basis. The discussion at previous council was that this is a burden on businesses that have faced a very challenging economic environment over the last couple of years, and that it would be equitable for the municipality to offer some form of rebate. Administration has recommended a program that we could implement towards the end of this year, and that the program be funded up to a maximum funding amount. So essentially the total pot of money available to fund rebates would be $90,000, and that the maximum that any business could qualify for in terms of a rebate would be $2,000. I think from there, Your Worship, and again, respecting that council has likely read the report and is aware of the issue, I won't belabor the point, but I will open up for questions from council members, recognizing that many of you didn't have an opportunity to question this issue when it arose at committee with the last council.
Thank you, Mr. Given. And councillors, if there are questions concerning the report or the recommendation from administration, I welcome those at this time. Councillor Wilson.
Just to get it going. So the $2,000 max per business, is that reflected on, like, so if a business was in essence closed for 2 years, would they have paid in excess of 2,000 in utilities, or is it, it's kind of reflective of, the amount that they would have paid over the last 2 years if they were closed for the straight 2 years?
Yes, Your Worship, if I may, for Councillor Wilson. So for garbage, each commercial account pays a minimum bi-monthly billing of $288.37, and they pay a flat recycling charge of $131. So administration estimates that this should cover the closure for the amount that businesses would have been closed over that period, because we are looking at it on a monthly basis rather than a bi-monthly. But additionally, there are, in administration's original report, when we were considering government mandated closures exclusively, and just to acknowledge that has been somewhat expanded, because not every business, some businesses may have chosen to take a more proactive, safe approach in response to COVID, may have chosen to remain closed even though they may not have been mandated. And committee gave direction, and what you're seeing in the recommended motion is committee essentially expanding the scope. To administration's knowledge, there have not been any businesses that have been closed for that entire duration due to COVID. And so our estimation is that that $2,000 maximum grant should be adequate to compensate businesses for times where they were paying solid waste and recycling fees.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson and Mr. Given. Councillor Wilson, did you have a follow-up?
No, I appreciate that. And as Mr. Given said, there are very, very few businesses that would have been, mandated closed for 2 years. I can't really name one, but I definitely understand the theater has had many, many challenges. So, business like that, I would hope to just make sure that we're treating them as fair as we are other businesses, and it sounds like we are.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Demota.
No, my sentiments were covered. I think from Mr. Given and what Councillor Wilson had stated that everything's cleared. I was really happy with the research that went behind this and the presentation with the numbers. Everything makes sense, and I'm comfortable and confident with what we have in front of us. So I'm going to be voting in favor of this. And again, I'm very appreciative of the work.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wanted to just say the approach to this, as I watched it, I found it to be fair, equitable, manageable, timely. I think that's very important. I did hear some concern or did watch if the $90,000 was to be, if we approach that amount, that there's an opportunity that council might be able to approve additional funding. So that's one question. I just wanted to make sure I heard correctly. And the only other question I have is, we're moving into a period where this will be made available to businesses in December, January. Some individuals, some businesses will be closed. And I just want to ensure there's an opportunity that this gets communicated to those businesses. Should they not be necessarily in Jasper and they don't get a utility bill, to ensure that they know they can take advantage of the program. And thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Mr. Given.
Your Worship, for Councillor Melnick. Yes, administration did report that we would come back to council with the results of the program at the program close. And if the program was oversubscribed, we'd be able to report that to council, and council would have the opportunity to consider whether they should add additional funds to the program. So yes, I can confirm that you would have that authority, certainly. And again, we would report to you about the utilization of the program so the council could make some decisions. And with respect to informing businesses, we would work both through our own municipal channels, broadly through general public communication and advertising in the community. We would work through our utility billings to ensure that business customers receive notice through their utility billings. And then we'd also work through our partner organizations with Tourism Jasper and the Chamber of Commerce to ensure that they use their channels as best possible to connect with owners. If an owner has gone underground somewhere for a vacation, rightly earned, after the season and after the difficult couple of years, they may be difficult to get a hold of, but we will use all channels available to us to do the best that we can to make sure that we contact everyone. And as noted in the report, we see the program continuing into the end of March 2022 in terms of accepting applications. And so if there's somebody that we can't get a hold of between March 31st and now, we may take under advisement if there are some other channels that we could use to reach those people that hadn't been informed, but we will certainly use all available channels to do so well in advance.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, sorry, I just figured it out myself, but I was reading the last point of the recommendations. Applications begin to be accepted no later than December 1st. Sorry, I kind of assumed that was the up until, which doesn't make sense. And so it sounds like it's until into March. Yeah. So no earlier than December 1st, but I get the wording now. Thanks.
If there are no further questions for administration, I would welcome a motion and we can open debate. Councillor Wilson.
I would make a motion that we're making the, sorry, just one second here. Make the motion that council approve the establishment of a utility rate program reflective of the following: maximum program funding of $90,000 to be provided from the COVID recovery reserve, rebates to qualifying businesses based on days closed due to the public health restrictions, up to a maximum total rebate of $2,000 per business, and the program shall be funded on a first come first served basis until the total program funds are expended. And the last point, the applications will be begin to be accepted no later than December 1st, 2021. And yeah.
Okay. It is your motion, Councillor Wilson, but I want to be sure that you read the motion that you intended. So after committee of the whole last time, the recommendation from administration, which I think you read, was amended, and particularly in the second bullet point. And so what I heard you read was the initial recommendation, which said closed due to public health restrictions up to a maximum total rebate of $2,000 per business. Whereas the recommendation from committee of the whole was to say, due to public health restrictions and days where they were unable to open due to COVID-related issues, up to a maximum. So the difference between a mandated closure and a closure that may have initiated with the mandate but continued for COVID reasons. So I just want to be clear what motion it is that you intended to make.
Yeah, good question. I was just intending to make the motion as recommended. Although if we had made an amendment, is it not stated in there? So I'm just trying to, Rico, sorry.
So on your agenda, the item that begins agenda item 7.1 in red, request for decision, has the committee recommendation. The second page of that has just the word recommendation, which was the administrative recommendation. And they are different in that respect.
Okay, I understand now. Sorry, I was at the second page there. I am happy with the recommendation as amended and as suggested by yourself, Mayor Island. So not just that business would be closed due to government mandate, but COVID-related issues. Again, to a maximum of 2,000 per business. I could reread it if you'd like me to. I found what motion that I was intending to make.
Certainly, let for the record, go ahead and do that.
Okay, let's try this again. So I make the motion that council approve the establishment of a utility rate rebate program reflective of the following. First point would be the maximum program funding of $90,000 to be provided from the COVID Recovery Reserve. The second point would be the rebates to qualifying businesses based on days closed due to public health restrictions, as well as days where they were unable to open due to COVID-related issues, up to a maximum total rebate of $2,000 per business. And the program shall be funded on a first-come, first-served basis until the total program funds are expended and applications begin to be accepted no later than December 1st, 2021.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wilson. So that is the motion. Is there any debate on the motion? Councillor Demota.
No debate, but just maybe leaning on you for some to help with some clarity behind that, in case there are people that watch this that didn't get an opportunity to watch the last meeting. And I believe that it was your recommendation to perhaps contemplate that adjustment. And I thought that what you stated was very valuable for people to understand. And do you recall what the intention was and why we got there?
I do.
Would you like to share that with us again?
Well, basically, I mean, we have to have a starting point, which is public health directives close some businesses. But then even when those businesses may have been allowed to reopen, we found in our community that some could not, because perhaps somebody in the kitchen staff was infected with the virus, and then everybody surrounding them had to quarantine, and businesses simply were unable to reopen, even though technically they may have been permitted to reopen. So I thought to target relief where it was necessary, it was wise to broaden the field of those who might be able to apply and why they should be able to apply. So not just mandated closures, but closures that were in fact based on COVID issues, including loss of staff because of either quarantine or actual infection rates. And it's only fair to our businesses, I think, to recognize that they were subject to many pressures, which may have required them to close, and in those circumstances, granting relief through utility rebates seemed sensible to me, and that's why I made that proposal at the last committee of the whole.
Makes a heck of a lot of sense to me, and I really appreciate that. And sorry for making you repeat that, but I found that to be a very valid contribution to this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Any further debate? Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I just have a question, kind of related to what Councillor Malik was asking earlier. If we hit 90,000, are we able to revisit this to provide more funding?
We are. We have a COVID reserve of approximately $1 million. Some of it has already been spoken for. This is essentially 9% of that. But if we do become oversubscribed, it is, as Mr. Gibbon indicated earlier, certainly within Council's purview to decide to release further funds from the COVID Relief Fund. If there are no further, or pardon me, if there is no further debate, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Agenda item 8 is simply a bylaw summary for information. We have no bylaws to consider today. Agenda item 9, correspondence for information, consideration, or action. There has been nothing received that requires consideration or action, and nothing for the information of council, which takes us to agenda item 10, other new business, and Councillor Demota, 10.1, additions to the Committee of the Whole agenda for November 9th.
Well, with respect to Councillor Kelleher MP that can't be here today, I didn't want you to get away with having another short meeting, because I know that you two like to compete for longest meeting. So, but if we didn't have anything extra to talk about today, then, we would have had less to chew on. So I think, anyway, in the spirit of that, I thought that, we'd give us some other things to talk about. We don't know exactly what's going to be on the next Committee of the Whole agenda. I'm sure that there's going to be some things carried over. I just wanted to ask, actually, if Mr. Gibbon's still on, with respect to the tasks, were we going to add the ongoing task list to the regular agenda going forward? Was that one of the initiatives that we started out on? I was expecting to see it today, then I forgot to look until this morning.
Yeah. Mayor Ireland, if I may, Councillor Demota, the motion action list, I think you're referring to, is a regular standing item on the Committee of the Whole meeting. And so it's a chance for administration to show to council and the community what we're doing with your direction to us and to report back to you regularly. I'd note that the mayor, just before we all signed on, has sent a note to administration asking to have that discussion added to the next Committee of the Whole with his name beside it. I think with the intention of following up from a discussion at the end of last term of maybe having that motion action list presented also at the regular council meeting, at least just for information. So it's sort of there in both places. But I think the intention is to have it for discussion at the Committee of the Whole.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you. Well, and just not to make this too much of a cumbersome process, I just thought that, sometimes people that have regular jobs or have to work on the weekend, sometimes we get our Committee of the Whole agenda like on Friday, and then, not having a lot of time sometimes until Sunday night or Monday night to review and go over it. So, some clarification questions or getting prepared for the upcoming committee of the whole could be challenging sometimes. So I thought maybe an opportunity down the road is have that motion action list available, or, you know, even use other new business to let council know, hey, you know, this is coming up for committee of the whole. This is something new you haven't seen yet, and we're intending on putting this forward. And that's essentially what I'm doing today. And I thought, well, if other councillors want to do that, so you're not getting surprised with anything on the weekend, this is kind of what I intended doing. And if it ends up causing too much work, then we can abandon it. And, you know, I'm not saying this is the way it should go. So having said that, if you'll bear with me, there's just a few things that I wanted to talk about. A policy review priority list. Reconciliation was the term that I used last week. And then, you know, Jasper Day. And the reason I wanted to bring up the first one, the policy review list, like my initial intention was to address one or two policies, which I wanted to bring forward for the next committee of the whole. And then after further discussions and revelations of interpretations of policy, particularly the one that, you know, is our procedure bylaw, I thought that we needed to review, to put a priority list together. I think that was motioned in a past meeting. So, you know, what I thought was a priority of mine, you know, could be something different to someone else. So so on September 28th, on July 20th, sorry, the past council approved policy A001, a policy development review policy. And I think with the intention of having a policy review priority list. And then on September 28th, council directed administration to revise an internal fiscal cost and reporting policy B009. And I think that that's going to be one of the ones that are taking priority right now. And initially I thought, well, I made an election promise of having our one of our policies to be reviewed, and that was the public engagement policy, which needs to be reviewed every 2 years, and I think we're going past 7 now. But you know, obviously recognizing that there might be other priorities from other councillors, you know, that's something that we should discuss at committee of the whole, as well as our social media policy and the development of that. I don't intend administration to be working on all that before Christmas. I know we have a lot of things, like I said, that need to be done. So going forward with that next week, just maybe discuss a priority list for the ongoing development and review. And then I also mentioned reconciliation. You know, I'm requesting that to the next committee of the whole meeting, and I'm guided by the past council's commitment to refer the matter of regular ongoing reconciliation efforts to the 2022 strategic planning session. So to keep it short here, I'd just like to add a discussion next week on what councillors feel. My perception is having a higher level conversation outside of the inclusive initiative policy. And the last one is Jasper Day or Jasper Days. This isn't entirely out of self-interest. It's something that regained relevancy at the Culture and Rec Board. And some volunteer members who applied and were appointed under the old framework wanted to seek an opportunity to have or to look at what a Jasper Day could look at, or a weekend, or a week revolving around celebrating our uniqueness and embracing our diversity. And because the structure has changed, I didn't want that to kind of fall apart and let people's expectations down. So next week at committee, I was just going to ask the rest of council where we thought might be the appropriate place to keep that relevant. Now that we've gone to the community conversations models, and you know, where could the best opportunity to have a community-driven initiative get some legs like that? And not just that, if anybody else wants to add things, you know, like I think everyone should feel welcome to be able to participate in adding things. So that's just all I had to say. Does anybody have any thoughts or concerns? My intention wasn't to have debate on those today, and but if there's some discomfort or feeling like that's too much, then I'm okay with not bringing all those forward next week.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. I'm looking for any hands up from councillors if they have questions. I have some if nobody else does. You want to engender a conversation, I take it at Committee of the Whole, on these subjects. Is the first one policy review priorities? Is that the nature of the discussion you want to kickstart?
Yes. So I couldn't find it, but I believe that when we put the motion forward to approve policy A001, and then forward that with the fiscal controls reporting B009, I believe somewhere, and I couldn't find it, the recollection is that we were going to get a priority list with attached to the construction or the revising of B009. I might have misread that, or maybe we can ask administration if they recall that.
Mr. Given, please.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. When Council brought the policy development and review policy forward, at that time, we made a recommendation that Council identify their priorities. And at that time, Council identified the fiscal and financial controls policy as their priority number one, and directed administration to develop additional, the cycle for the others, priority list. Council didn't at that time give direction for administration to return to that, to return to committee with that priority list. It was essentially left in Council's in administration's hands to determine that priority list, and we would do that sort of in alignment with our workload or Council expressed priorities. I think the idea of having an early discussion with this Council about what this Council's priorities are for reviewing policy would make a lot of sense. And certainly administration would take that direction from committee if it arose. I think between now and then, council members would likely want to review, at least at a cursory level, some of the policies that as they exist. There's a lot of them. And you may want to come prepared to that discussion to identify which priorities you may have as an individual council member to have that discussion, but certainly administration only received direction from the last council about the number one priority. And it was sort of left to administration to determine all of the following order of priorities. But if this council wishes to give us more direction, that would be helpful.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I may follow up, I think that's healthy because I would like to work hand in hand with administration like that and not dictate the conversation because they understand their workload better. And at the same time, I think it's important to have council at least field their input and maybe how they feel a priority might be. And my priority to get something done might not be all of council's. So, I think that just opening it up for conversation and, having a little bit of a brainstorming session around that. And like I said, I'm not intending on developing a whole list next week, but some identifiable ones that might be low-hanging fruit that we might be able to accomplish in some due time could be appropriate. And having said that, I did find some challenges even with our own procedure bylaw. So I think that even though that's not a policy, that's something that I think we should review early because there are some old structures in there that make reference to committees or boards that may no longer exist. So a lot of those things are intertwined. The reason I brought up the public engagement one is because I think that we need to look at how community conversations initiatives are going to affect council decision making, and the importance of what's put in those conversations, and what relevance that means to council when it does come forward. So if that's going to be part of public engagement, that should be in the revision of our current policy, and things that were relevant 7 or so years ago have changed quite a bit. And the reason I brought up a social media policy is because that might be intertwined with that as well. So those are only my thoughts. If there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. If not, then I'm okay to discuss it next week too.
Thank you, Councillor Demoda. I am just trying to clarify what might be on next week's agenda. So item 1, as I understand it, would be council developing priorities for the policy development and review list, at least starting that conversation. Is that
Sounds good? Yep.
And that might include, as you said, public engagement policy, might include social media policy.
Correct.
Which have been discussed and were discussed Monday of last week in our orientation session. So that's good. That's one item. Secondly, was there something before reconciliation?
No.
That you mentioned? Okay, so you want a general discussion about that. And yes, thirdly, then, where Jasper Days might fit in the new configuration of community conversations, presumably. Okay.
Yeah, and anything that other councillors where they sat on other boards or committees that want to bring forward of relevance and question where past initiatives might land because of the change, I think is also a good idea to bring forward while we're having that discussion.
Right. Thank you for that. Mr. Given, is it clear enough from administration's perspective what is being requested to add to the committee of the whole agenda for next week?
Yes, Your Worship, thank you, it is.
Thank you for that. Any other discussion from councillors? Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I would just like to say that I'm not adverse to these agenda items, although I'm a bit concerned that Councillor Dermody might be asking us to come to the table next week with some, ideas, direction. Reconciliation is huge, and I think we need to speak to it in our strat plan in the new year, rather than having a conversation just off the cuff, because I'm not ready for that conversation. I'm not educated enough. I don't have the information I need to have a really good conversation, and I'd like to put that on the agenda for conversation next week. I think might be a little bit too soon for me to have any meaningful engagement on that. I'm sure we can speak on Jasper Day as we have in the past, and again, I'm a little bit, and this is just me, I'm confused with a little bit of the first agenda item, so I'm not going to really be prepared for any meaningful engagement or conversation next week. I would need time for that, and I don't want to demean the items or anything like that, but I want to be ready for them, and I also want to have the wholesome conversation on it. So if we're just jamming these all into one agenda, I don't think that gives those items the worth that they need. You know what I mean? I know you were just starting the conversation. I think we're going to speak with them about them for months into the future, but I'm just cautioning you that I'm not really going to be prepared for that conversation next week.
And this, if I may, Mr. Mayor,
yes.
This is exactly why I wanted to start conversations early, because I've found in the past that often, council or councillors will feel a little overwhelmed, or not have enough time to prepare. So that's why I'm kind of trying to help set a stage so that we can have some time to contemplate and do the work to be prepared, so that we're ready to have conversations like you. There's a lot of intimidation, and I have a little bit of fear of saying and doing the wrong things. But at the same time, we're going to stumble and we're not going to get things right. The effort is to get it as right as possible. But for me, I think before we go into strat planning, my intention was not starting from scratch when we get there. So what are the expectations from our partners, whether it's Parks Canada or the Indigenous partners, and what are their expectations of us, and what would our expectations be going forward? So it's just a matter of, I know that we're working on, our inclusion policy. I think what I'm talking about is having a discussion at a higher level and just discussing the expectations first, because we can't put anything into motion until we understand expectations. So we don't have to talk about it next week. If that's putting too much pressure on you, I don't want this to be a painful thing. It should feel natural and we should embrace it. So I'm okay with putting it off if people need more time or feel like they need more time. We do have a commitment to talk about it in 2022 and in the strat planning thing. I just think that we made the effort to review the discussion on this, and I think it's important. That's all.
Thank you for that. Anything further on that topic or the related topics? Councillor Melnick.
Recognizing where Councillor Demota is coming from, having these on the agenda to initiate conversation, I'm fully comfortable with the expectation that it'll be ongoing and will probably continue well into the new year on many of these topics. Certainly, I agree with Councillor Wilson. Having advance notice is more for us to be able to wrap our head around some of the items, but not to come to any consensus, I don't think, in the committee of the whole on any of these as we move forward. I would not be prepared to come to consensus on any of the four other than the policy to review priorities. And then the other three I see as an ongoing evolution. I am in favor of having this appear on the committee of the whole agenda. And just so everyone's clear, that's where my head is at regarding how we move forward.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Councillor Demota. Yeah,
and you know what? I should be more clear. My intention is not to make decisions next week or give direction. We can have things on the committee of the whole agenda as discussion items and not, because it's a committee of the whole meeting, doesn't mean that we need to set direction for everything. So we could bring it up for conversation and refer it to later dates. I did have something written down here, and it's all about these are just seeds to be planted for the future. And some of it coincides with some initiatives that we already are partaking in. And some of those seeds are coming into fruition. And a lot of these initiatives are ongoing and just coinciding with that. So, we didn't have a lot to talk about today. I'm not sure what's on the agenda for next week. So, in light of that, this does give us something to talk about, and I think relevant things to talk about. And I don't think that we should be scared of discussing issues.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I do think it's a good idea to start this conversation. I won't be 100% prepared, but I do have some ideas. I do have a question though as well. We have until Wednesday at noon or at 4 to get items onto the agenda that will be on the following meetings. Is this the time right now we're talking about it? Is it time to add things, or can I don't want this meeting to be 8 hours long, but I don't necessarily know how long these meetings go. And if I wanted to add something, I still have time to do that before Wednesday. But I do think reconciliation should be a conversation we start.
I think Mr. Given was prepared to give a technical answer to how you might get something on the agenda. So go ahead, Mr. Given.
Yes, Your Worship. A technical answer to exactly that. There are a number of outlets for council members, and certainly the practice that we had started last term was that any member of council is welcome to add any item to a committee of the whole meeting, just simply with an email to myself and maybe copying council colleagues, so that we can add that to the committee of the whole meeting with the council member's name beside it and the expectation that the council member is responsible for introducing it and raising any business that they wish to raise. And then it's up to the council member and to convince their council colleagues to support that direction that they wish to bring forward. I also wanted to share for council, because you haven't seen the agenda, we are entering into budget season. Administration has been coordinating with external community groups that the municipality traditionally provides funding to make their presentations with respect to budget on the 9th. And so we will have at least 5 community groups who are expecting to present to council at that committee of the whole meeting around their budget requests. So council should expect that there would be a fairly significant amount of time allotted to those presentations. And so you may want to maybe assess how that meeting goes before adding too many additional things. But in it, there is at least one other request for decision that will be coming from administration to council at that meeting. And so there are already a number of agenda items. And if any council member wants to add an additional item with their name beside it, simply an email to myself and council, and we will add that to the written agenda that would be published on the Friday afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councillor DeBona.
Okay, and so I wasn't really intending to have a lot of debate today, and I apologize, and I really appreciate people like wading through it and putting up with my broken pitches here. I'm trying to get better at this. Anyway, for that specific reason right there, I think that this is a good opportunity. Like, let's just say we just plug through the whole thing and not ask the question. On Friday, we would have been made aware that we have several presentations coming up on Tuesday. And this is no dig towards administration or anything. And, you know, I don't want to dwell on the past either, but sometimes, like, when you fix things that weren't broken, sometimes those processes were there to help our progress in the future. So we used to have a thing called notice of motion, and that kind of got changed along through different processes. So now we have to wait until Friday to see what's on the agenda entirely. So I think in order to be better prepared and maybe not throw a bunch of stuff onto agenda, if we can find some other mechanism that council can be informed in advance of what might be coming up for committee of the whole, we have a pretty good idea of what's coming to regular meetings, because most of that gets directed out of committee of the whole. So I think that we have a little bit of a gap that we could address, I think, towards having a more informed and educated process, and maybe save us time. I don't know if everyone feels that way. That's just from my experience. And I think that, you know, there is room for improvement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeMota. I think that there is, arising from all of this discussion, a willingness for administration to have the 3 items that you mentioned, Councillor DeMota, added to next committee of the whole meeting. We will see next week what the available time provides for discussion, given that we have just received information that there will be 5 presentations with respect to budget. But I think, without having known the details, I think those of us who have been here in the past at least had some anticipation that something like that would unfold. But we have now some fairly detailed information about what's coming on the committee of the whole agenda next week. So we can treat it as we're able at that time. And as we discussed last Monday, all agendas are council's agendas. And so we can adapt and change the agenda as seems best to council as a group. So I think that we have covered that. I will say with respect to reconciliation, as has been said by others, it took our nation 7 generations to get where we are. It's going to take a long time to unwind. And last council took steps, including adopting the land acknowledgement policy, and then otherwise referred, and I think rightly referred, ongoing discussions to our strategic priority session in January, recognizing that this is an intensely complex area and ought not to be rushed. I appreciate we won't get everything right the first time, but on the other hand, not something to be rushed. So I may again take that position when it's on our agenda next week. And although I agree that we ought to look at priority list for policy development and review, policy does not include bylaws. And it seems to me that what is referenced in many of your remarks, Councillor Demota, is a need to review the procedure bylaw. It's a bylaw, it's not a policy, so it won't fit within the policy review priorities. But as a standalone item, I think the sooner we tackle our procedure bylaw for a number of reasons, the better off we'll all be. So again, just something to be prepared for next week when these matters come back on the committee of the whole agenda. If there is no other new business, nobody made any motions to add new business, but I typically allow for new business in any event if there is anything that somebody forgot. If there is nothing, I will move to agenda item 11, Councillor Reports. Are there any reports or councillors wish to make? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you. Working with mute there. Nothing like hitting the ground running. I did have the opportunity to participate in the Trans-Canada Yellowhead Highway Association quarterly meeting, which was held on Friday. That being, I guess, within the realm of my responsibilities. I will give you some very quick updates with that. I was elected to be a director on the board in keeping with the tradition of Bert Cherneau's service to that association over many years. Second thing that came up from that particular discussion is the association did have an opportunity to meet with the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada on the October 21st. During that meeting, they did indicate and recognize what we learned at NETMA, which was the development that currently is going on by the Information Center and the CIBC of the permanent display. And that was heralded in that meeting, that that's a very positive step forward. And in the spirit of that, we have extended an invitation from the Trans-Canada Yellowhead Highway Association to have a member of the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada sit on the board so that we can best hold together the best of Indigenous tourism across the highway from Manitoba right through to BC, which is in the spirit of, I believe, the continuing and ongoing education in this particular area. And I was really happy to see that. Secondly, next week, there is a museum board meeting, which I will be attending as well, and will report at a subsequent council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. And yes, indeed, you hit the ground running. Excellent for you to have already attended your first assignment meeting. Any other reports? Councillor Demota.
In Councillor Keller MP's absence, she asked me to let council know that our first Community Futures West Yellowhead meeting is this Friday. You know, unfortunately, it's set for 10 o'clock, and I already have some schedule conflict. In particular, No Stone Left Alone at 10:30 at the Jasper Cemetery, and if anyone hasn't attended that yet, if I can't make it, I really want I really promote a council presence there. It's a very worthwhile event to observe and be part of. The grade 8 students of Jasper attend that, and it's a bit of an eye-opener for quite some people. When you go through some of the footsteps from the young people that served in the past, and you look at the age of the people that are there, you know, observing that, and you look around, and there were some incredible sacrifices made, and you know, you get an idea of the people that have served you know, our country from Jasper, and their graves located there. So I highly recommend it. It's a good thing to be part of, and it's a rewarding event. So if any of you can make it, and I also recommend that people from the community come up and participate if they have the time and can do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. In the absence of other reports, I will report to council that Thursday of last week, I had my first opportunity in many, many months, almost 2 years, to give welcome remarks to a conference in town. The Alberta Foster and Kinship Association has been coming to Jasper for a long number of years. This year was their 47th conference, and I was invited to speak to them. And although numbers were necessarily down because of COVID, they have at least returned to in-person conventions in Jasper, and so that heralds new opportunities or renewed opportunities for a large portion of our commercial sector to welcome conventions again. So I was delighted to speak to the Foster and Kinship Association on Thursday, and hopefully they will continue to come back here annually. They absolutely express nothing but love for our community, so it's great to welcome them here. And on Friday last week, the Legion nationally launched the Poppy campaign, and they have a program this year where the president of the Legion, who just happens to be one Greg Van Tighem, presents a poppy to the mayor. So I attended at the Legion Friday afternoon and received a poppy from the president of the Legion. So the Poppy campaign has begun, and I apologize that my poppy was left on another coat, and here I am without my poppy. I feel badly for that, and we'll make amends. But those are my reports for today. If there is nothing further by way of reports, agenda item 12, upcoming events. Councillor Demota has indicated the No Stone Left Alone ceremony at the cemetery, 10:30 a.m. on November 5th, a very worthwhile event indeed. We are, I think, all scheduled for the Muni 101 course, the pre-convention course in Edmonton, November 14 to 16, the conference beginning on the 17th to the 19th, after which we return home and start public budget presentations November 22nd and 23rd. Not on the list, but worth mentioning, if anybody knows the details of the Remembrance Day service, I have not heard whether it is the traditional service in the multipurpose hall or whether it will be a service as it was last year at the cenotaph, which seems more likely. But if that can be determined and circulated, undoubtedly there will be a Remembrance Day service on November 11th at 11 o'clock. Mr. Melnick, Councillor Melnick, you know something about that?
I'm just going to say, unless somebody has that information right at hand, I will go and just quickly check, and I'll come back with that information. I do believe that it is outside, though, from memory. We're calling from memory.
I would expect that you can't go wrong arriving at the cenotaph at about 10:30 in anticipation of the service at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. And also not on the list of upcoming events, but I know that other councillors have received an invitation to the Legion mess dinner on November 13th. That is an event that I will be unable to attend. So I would look first to the Deputy Mayor, whether he might be available for an attendance November 13th, but I think that all of council were invited in any event. So it would be important to have some council representation there. And if anyone can confirm that they will be in attendance, I would appreciate that because I'm unable to be there. Councillor Wilson?
Could you tell me the details again? November 13th? I'm sorry, you do have the email, but
is that the...
I will confirm to you, Mayor Ireland, after the meeting.
Thank you. That is appreciated. And that is all I have, but Mr. Given has some other dates for us.
Yes, Your Worship, I just wanted to provide council a very early heads up on our strategic planning session. You will receive formal calendar invites so that you can start to block the space, but I thought given this first opportunity, we'd highlight that we have tentatively booked January 12th to 14th, probably the afternoon of the 12th, and then the 13th and 14th. So we will be sending you out formal communication on that, but just an early heads up on that item for early in the new year. And then also, Your Worship, not an early heads up, but because it's proceeding quite quickly, just wanted to provide a return back to council to say that we are working with the municipalities of Banff and Canmore to arrange an opportunity for the three councils to meet and discuss common issues at the AUMA convention. And so I've been working with the other two CAOs to coordinate that, and we'll also be sending you a formal invitation to your calendars so that you can get that in. That will likely be the evening of the 17th, where all three councils will have an opportunity to get together and discuss our common interests in resort municipality status and a number of other items.
Thank you for that, Mr. Given. And yes, please do, everyone, pre-book those dates in January. It is imperative that if we are going to have a strategic priority session, that all of council and our directors be present in the same place at the same time to the extent possible. All right, if there is nothing further, I will invite a motion to adjourn. It took time, but I'm going to say that Councillor Demota got his hand up first. All in favor? We are adjourned. I'm not quite sure what happened to Councillor Waxer, but I don't see her on screen. So hopefully staff noticed when she departed the meeting because I did not make a note of it. But
I think my talking put her computer to sleep.
And I wasn't quick enough before we adjourned, but it is at the November 11th ceremony is at the cenotaph starting at 10:30. So arriving early is a good thing.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. We are adjourned. Thank you all. Thank you to those members of the public who tuned in for this first council meeting of the community's new council. Thank you all, and we'll see you next Tuesday morning at 9:30 rather than the 1:30 start. And Deputy Mayor Wilson, that will be yours. All right. Good afternoon to all.
Take care.